Julius Erving, the popular Dr. J, has said there is no greatest player in basketball, but rather great teams determine wins, given that he has faced tough opponents like Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, and even a young Michael Jordan, legends to the sports, but none of them were the toughest opponent of his career. That title belongs to a name many fans overlook: Bernard King. Yes, the same Bernard King who could torch defenses without even taking a three. For Dr. J to single him out above the biggest legends of the game is more than surprising. It's a revelation that rewrites how we remember basketball history. Before we even mention Bernard King, we need to understand who Julius Erving truly was. Because when Dr. J singles out a player as his toughest opponent, that statement carries enormous weight. Erving wasn't just another great scorer or highlight maker, he was a pioneer who reshaped the very image of basketball. Julius Erving played the game with a blend of artistry and athleticism that had never been seen before. In the 1970s, the NBA was still finding its identity, struggling to attract mainstream attention. Enter Erving, a player who could float through the air with unmatched grace, dunk with power, and finish around the rim in ways that left crowds speechless.
Here's a shot, Julius. He scores!
His game wasn't only about winning, it was about creating moments. Every drive, every slam, every elegant layup became a piece of poetry in motion. Erving first dominated the ABA, leading the New York Nets to 2 championships and establishing himself as the face of the league. When the ABA merged with the NBA in 1976, he didn't just adapt, he elevated. With the Philadelphia 76ers, he became an MVP, a champion, and a global ambassador for the sport. Fans didn't just watch Dr. J play basketball, they experienced him, as if he was performing on a stage. So when a legend of this magnitude admits that a player pushed him to his limits, it signals that the opponent wasn't ordinary. Bernard King had to be something truly extraordinary. Now the question is, why did Julius Erving call Bernard King his toughest matchup?
For you in your career, Bernard King.
For Julius Erving, going up against Bernard King wasn't just another night at the office, it was a war of survival. Guarding King meant 94 feet of punishment, where every possession felt like a battle you were destined to lose. He was the type of scorer who made even perfect defense feel useless. Contest his jumper, and he'd rise up with that lightning-quick release, draining the shot right in your face as if your effort never mattered. Cut off his driving lane, and he'd pivot, spin, and glide into a silky fadeaway that looked more like an art form than a desperation move. And if you tried to muscle him, to beat him with sheer physicality, he would take the hit, absorb the contact, and still finish the play with the same calm precision. But what separated King from so many others wasn't just the scoring itself, it was the way he attacked your soul while he did it. Defending Bernard King was never just about your body. It was about your mind, your pride, and your confidence. He had a way of making every small mistake look massive. Leave him half a step of space, and he punished you. Force him into what looked like a bad shot, and he turned it into a highlight. Each bucket came with the unspoken message, "You cannot stop me." Slowly, possession after possession, King didn't just beat defenders, he broke them. That's why Julius Erving singled him out. Dr. J faced Kareem's unstoppable skyhook. He battled Larry Bird's cold precision and Magic Johnson's wizardry. He even matched up with a young Michael Jordan, who would go on to redefine scoring itself. Yet none of them, in Erving's eyes, tested him the way Bernard King did. King wasn't just talented, he was relentless. He forced you into a psychological game you couldn't win, where one mistake could unravel your entire night. So when Julius Erving, a man who faced the absolute giants of the game, calls Bernard King his toughest opponent, it isn't just flattery. It's confirmation that King wasn't only a scorer, he was a storm, a force of nature, the kind of player who could humble even legends. Bernard King's story begins in Brooklyn, New York. In 1956, a place where basketball wasn't just a game, it was survival. Growing up in Fort Greene, one of the toughest neighborhoods in the city, King quickly learned that the court was both an escape and a proving ground. The asphalt courts of Brooklyn shaped him into a fierce competitor long before he ever put on a college or professional jersey. By the time he was a teenager, word had already spread. Bernard King was different. He wasn't just playing basketball, he was dissecting it, mastering the little details that separated the good from the unstoppable. When King arrived at the University of Tennessee in the mid-1970s, he didn't just join the Volunteers. He transformed the entire program. Standing 6'7" with the strength of a forward and the agility of a guard, He brought SEC basketball a level of dominance it hadn't seen before. In just 3 seasons, King averaged over 25 points per game, won SEC Player of the Year 3 times, and turned Tennessee into must-watch basketball. He wasn't just putting up numbers, he was carrying his team night after night, proving that his street-honed game could thrive in the college spotlight. His scoring wasn't about flair, but about precision. Every move was intentional, every possession an opportunity to punish his defender. He had the kind of scoring touch that made coaches build entire game plans just to slow him down, and even then, he usually got his way. That relentless drive made him a legend on campus and one of the most feared college players of his era. By 1977, it was time for the NBA. Drafted by the New Jersey Nets with the 7th overall pick, King wasted no time showing that his college dominance was no fluke. In his rookie season, he averaged nearly 25 points per game, immediately cementing himself as one of the league's most dangerous scorers. It didn't matter that he was a first-year player. Veterans quickly learned that Bernard King wasn't intimidated by anyone. He attacked with the same fearlessness he had in Brooklyn and Tennessee, making his presence felt on every floor he stepped on. But what really set King apart during his early years was his resilience. He wasn't handed anything. Injuries and off-court challenges tested him, but every time, he found a way to bounce back stronger. That perseverance became a theme throughout his career. For a kid from Brooklyn, nothing ever came easy, and maybe that's what made him so relentless. Every bucket wasn't just 2 points. It was proof of survival, proof of growth, proof that Bernard King could rise above any challenge. If you ask players from the 1980s what made Bernard King so dangerous, you'll hear the same thing over and over. He had an unstoppable scoring arsenal. But it wasn't flashy. He didn't rely on crossover dribbles or deep three-pointers. What made King a nightmare for defenders was his efficiency and his relentlessness. He turned scoring into a science. The core of his game was the mid-range jumper, a weapon he turned into an art form. In an era long before analytics tried to erase that part of the game, King made it his bread and butter. His release was lightning quick, his footwork impeccable. Defenders barely had time to react before the ball was sailing through the net, and once he got into rhythm, it was almost impossible to knock him off balance. But he wasn't just a jump shooter. King attacked the rim with power, using his size and strength to bully smaller defenders, while still having the finesse to finish around taller ones. He had a spin move that became the stuff of legend, fast, compact, and nearly impossible to predict. 1 second you thought you had him cut off, the next he was laying the ball in over your shoulder. It was that combination of brute force and elegance that made him unique. Perhaps the most frustrating thing for opponents was how little effort he seemed to waste. King wasn't out there dancing with the ball or taking 20 dribbles to find a shot. He operated with surgical precision. 2 dribbles, a pivot, rise up bucket. Give him a sliver of space, and it was over. Even when defenses threw double teams his way, he had the patience and vision to pick them apart, either scoring through pressure or finding the right play to keep the offense flowing. What truly elevated King was his mentality. He didn't just want to score, he wanted to dominate. Every possession was an opportunity to impose his will. Defenders like Julius Erving, who prided themselves on elite defense, admitted that no matter how disciplined you were, King always had an answer. Contest his shot? He'd sink it anyway. Force him into a tough angle? He'd make it look easy. Play him physical? He'd take the hit and still finish strong. This relentlessness built up over the course of a game, and that's when the psychological warfare kicked in. Opponents would start questioning themselves. What more can I do? That's when King had you beaten not just on the scoreboard, but in your mind. He wasn't simply scoring points. He was breaking down confidence, possession after possession. In an era filled with legends Bird, Magic, Dr. J. Bernard King carved his niche by being the most efficient and ruthless scorer on the floor. He didn't need flash. He didn't need hype. All he needed was the ball in his hands and a defender in front of him. And once that happened, it was already too late. When Bernard King arrived in New York in the early 1980s, Madison Square Garden didn't just become a home court, it became his theater. Every night, fans packed the arena not just to watch basketball, but to witness a masterclass in scoring. King's ability to dominate defenders seemed almost effortless, yet every basket came from precision and skill. His crowning jewel came on Christmas Day in 1984, when he erupted for 60 points against the New Jersey Nets. What made it remarkable wasn't just the total, but how he did it without leaning on the three-point shot. Possession after possession, he carved through the defense with mid-range jumpers, spins, and drives. That performance, still one of the most iconic in NBA holiday history, cemented King as a true entertainer. a man who made Madison Square Garden roar like no one else of his era. If Bernard King's Christmas masterpiece showed his artistry, the 1984 playoffs revealed his warrior spirit. Against the Detroit Pistons and a young Isaiah Thomas, King averaged a jaw-dropping 42.6 points per game across the series, a feat matched by only a handful of legends in playoff history. What makes it even more incredible is the condition he was in. King played with both hands heavily bandaged due to injuries, yet he refused to back down. Instead, he turned pain into fuel, delivering back-to-back 50-point explosions that left the Pistons scrambling for answers. His willpower and scoring touch blended into one of the most unforgettable postseason runs in NBA history. Fans and opponents alike watched in awe as King battled through adversity with a relentless fire, proving that greatness isn't just about talent, it's about resilience when the odds are stacked against you. When discussing Bernard King's place in basketball history, it's not just Julius Erving's respect that stands out, it's the chorus of legends who echoed the same sentiment. Larry Bird, one of the greatest offensive minds the game has ever seen, didn't hand out compliments lightly. Yet even Bird admitted without hesitation, Bernard King could score on anybody. He was just unstoppable. That statement carried weight because Bird himself was known for torching defenses in ways that seemed impossible. For him to single out King was a recognition of just how deadly his offensive arsenal truly was. Funny how King feared Larry too by singling him out as his toughest player. And Bird wasn't alone.
Bird was the toughest player I've ever had to face.
Dominique Wilkins, nicknamed the Human Highlight Film for his own spectacular scoring and athleticism, also ranked King among the fiercest opponents he ever faced. He said Bernard is the only man that scared the hell out of him.
Never feared anybody I've ever played against. That's the only man that scared the hell out of him.
Dominique thrived on attacking defenders, yet he knew firsthand the helplessness of trying to stop King's efficient mid-range game and relentless attacks at the basket. What makes this respect even more meaningful is that these weren't ordinary players giving praise, these were icons of the 1980s. Men whose reputations were built on scoring in an era defined by physicality, hand-checking, and no easy buckets. For them to admit that King stood out even among their peers says everything about his greatness. King didn't just earn admiration because of his numbers, but because of the way he imposed his will. Night after night, legends walked off the court knowing they had just faced a force of nature. A coach during his coaching days said Bernard was the hardest guy he had to guide other than Larry Bird. That collective recognition from Erving, Bird, and Wilkins places Bernard King in rare company, where respect wasn't handed out, it was earned. Earned through blood, sweat, and a relentless scoring touch that no defense of the era could consistently contain. Just as Bernard King was climbing toward his absolute peak, fate dealt him a devastating blow. In March of 1985, King tore the anterior cruciate ligament in his right knee, an injury that, in today's era of advanced medicine, is tough but recoverable. But in the mid-1980s, an ACL tear was considered almost a death sentence for a basketball career. The Knicks, desperate for wins and not convinced King would return to form, moved on without him. For many, that was the sad closing chapter of what could have been an all-time career. But Bernard King was never built like most players. Through years of painful rehab, setbacks, and sheer willpower, he clawed his way back into the league. His comeback wasn't symbolic, it was sensational. With the Washington Bullets, he not only returned, but thrived, averaging over 28 points per game in 1990 and earning an All-Star selection in 1991. Few stories in NBA history capture the grit and resilience of a player like King's battle against injury. He refused to let the game end on someone else's turn. When fans and historians talk about Bernard King, one question always lingers. What if? What if he had never suffered that ACL injury at the peak of his dominance? Without that setback, it's not hard to picture King adding several more prime years to his career, pushing his totals into historic territory and competing more directly with Jordan, Bird, and Magic as one of the defining superstars of the 1980s. Statistically, he was already right there. From 1983 to 1985, he was arguably the most unstoppable scorer alive, blending power, finesse, and efficiency like no one else in his era. A healthy King might have elevated the Knicks into serious championship contention, rewriting both his legacy and theirs. The frustrating reality is that his career leaves us with glimpses of what could have been. Breathtaking scoring runs, iconic playoff battles, and a reputation as the ultimate matchup nightmare. Julius Erving's declaration that King was his toughest opponent only strengthens the idea that, if not for injury, King might be remembered as one of the undisputed faces of 1980s basketball. Instead, his story is equal parts brilliance and bittersweet possibility. Despite his jaw-dropping talent and the respect of his peers, Bernard King often finds himself overlooked in conversations about the all-time greats. Part of the reason is circumstance. He spent much of his career on teams that weren't serious championship contenders, so he never got the spotlight that comes with playing deep into June. The other factor is injury. Losing multiple prime years in the middle of his career meant his overall numbers and longevity didn't quite match icons like Bird, Magic, or Jordan. But those who played against him, Julius Erving, Larry Bird, Dominique Wilkins, never hesitated to call him one of the toughest scorers they ever faced. And that peer respect is a legacy in itself. Today's fans might not see King's name on every top 10 list, but when you dig deeper, you realize he was a pioneer of scoring efficiency and offensive dominance in an era that wasn't designed for it. His story is a reminder that greatness isn't always measured in rings or headlines. So now I'll ask you, where does Bernard King rank in your list of greatest scorers? Do you think his injury robbed him of a top 10 all-time legacy? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and if you love deep dives into NBA legends, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss a story.